Hello. Pull. Oh. Ooh. Yeah.
Greetings to all presenters and Madam Patricia. For our class, which is Introduction to Malaysian Constitution, our group 4 will be presenting about freedom of speech and expression in Malaysia and its own limitations. My name is Manuela Analuso and I'll be presenting about the introduction of freedom of speech and expression in Malaysia, including the limitation. The freedom of speech and expression is an important right to all men. By saying so, a person's freedom of expression can be described as one of the man's most cherished freedom. Such so, every citizen has the right to freedom of speech and expression. But this freedom can also subject to any reasonable restrictions imposed by the federal laws. The right of freedom is very broad, but it has limits and can be restricted. The rules of restriction is if the person violates the rights of another person. There are actually 3 limitations for these laws of freedom can be restricted. 1. The freedom of speech cannot be in respect of propaganda for war. For example, if you use your freedom of speech to incite war between 2 countries or more, or to incite wars or fight between other person to other person, this limitation can be restricted on you. The second limitation is provocation of imminent violence. By saying so, any kind of provocations using speech or expression must be limited or restricted by the law. This is to avoid any further fights from future or in the present. And the third limitation is hate speech based on race, ethnicity, gender, or religion. All of this is a very sensitive topic for all of us, which is why the freedom of speech has its own limitation on this scope.
Freedom of expression is a fundamental right exercised in the Malaysian Constitution under Article 10. It's a government the freedom of every citizen to voice the opinion and idea. However, this right is not all solutions, and there are limits to do the Malaysian government as impose serial restrictions on freedom to experience. Okay, firstly, Sedition Act. This law criminal any speech or action them to seditations. Okay, next is Official Secretariat Act. This law prohibits unauthorized disclosure of classified information. Okay. Next is Communication and Multimedia Act. Okay, this law regulation online communication and impose relations of offenses as spring fake news.
The right to freedom of expression in Malaysia is guaranteed under Article 10 Federal Constitution. The protection of this right is integral not only to Malaysia's progress as a democratic country, but also to the survival and development of every individual citizen. Although the enjoyment of one's freedom of expression may be restricted, such restriction must always be grounded in law, necessary and proportionately enforced to achieve legitimate aims. expression that propagate war and advocate the incitement to national, racial, and religious hatred, violence and discrimination must also be prohibited. Since its establishment, the Commission has consistently called for and made recommendations for reform of law regulating freedom of expression, including for the repeal of Sedition Act 1948.
Next, the limitation of speech. The limitation of speech underscore the importance of alternative forms of communication, including nonverbal cues, written expressions, and active listening to enhance understanding. Certainly, while speech is a powerful means of communication, it has inherent limitations. One limitation lies in expressing complex emotions, as verbal language may struggle to capture the depth and intricacies of certain feelings, while nuances, subtleties, and nonverbal cues such as facial expressions and body language often play a crucial role in communication but are absent in spoken words. Moreover, language barriers can hinder effective communication, making it challenging for individuals who speak different languages to convey their thoughts accurately. Misinterpretation is another issue, as words may be understood differently based on cultural, contextual, or personal factors.
Now we proceed to the limitation of expression in Malaysia. The limitation of freedom of expression in Malaysia are outlined in Article 10 of the Federal Constitution. While freedom of speech and expression is recognized as a constitutional right, it is not absolute and is subject to certain restrictions. These limitations include national security. The government can impose restriction of freedom of speech and expression if it is deemed necessary for national security. Secondly, public order. Restriction can be placed on freedom of speech and expression to maintain public order and prevent the incitement of violence or unrest. Next, morality and decency. Content that is considered obscene, offensive, or against public morality and decency can be restricted. Then, defamation and slander. Speech that defame or slander individual or organization can be subject to legal action. Last but not least, racial and religious sensitive. Malaysia is a multi-ethnic and multi-religious country, and speech that promote hatred or incite violence based on race or religion can be restricted. For conclusion, it is important to note that these limitations are intended to balance the right to freedom of expression with the need to protect public welfare and social harmony.
In conclusion, the freedom of speech and expressions is a basic human right that must be given to every citizen of each country. However, it is quite sad to see the way that the government of certain countries do not provide even these essential human rights to the rest of the citizens and oppresses them to fulfill their own selfish motives. That is all from our group. Thank you for listening.